Kunal was a simple man with big dreams. He grew up in the busy streets of Abadan, where music was more than just sound. It was his voice, his way of telling stories that no one else seemed to hear. Every morning he carried his old guitar to the market square, playing for strangers who sometimes dropped coins and sometimes just walked past. Yet even on the hardest days he smiled. Music was his heartbeat, and he believed that one day, his songs would touch people far beyond the street corners. His wife, Tarila, was the opposite of his world. She came from a well-off family, used to fine clothes, social gatherings, and a life of comfort. Her parents had never liked Kunal. They called him a man with dreams but no direction. But Tarila fell in love with his calmness, his charm, and the way he looked at her as if she was the only person in the world. Kunal treated her with tenderness, cooking for her when he could, writing small songs about her laughter, her eyes, her warmth. He believed that love was enough to fill the space money couldn't. In the beginning, things felt magical. Kunal played his songs for her in the evenings, and she would smile, saying, "You'll be great one day." But as time went on, reality began to whisper louder than love. The bills piled up, his music barely earned enough, and Tarila started to change. She missed the comfort she once knew, the fancy outings, and the attention from her rich friends. When they visited, she avoided introducing Kunal as her husband, calling him a friend who loves music. Kunal noticed, but he didn't complain. He thought patience would heal everything. Every night he sat with his guitar, writing songs about hope, pain, and dreams. His neighbors would gather around to listen, saying his songs carried the voice of a man who feels deeply. Yet the woman he loved most no longer listened. She would close the door, saying she was tired, leaving him to sing to the stars. Sometimes he stared at her sleeping face and whispered, "One day, I'll make you proud." In his heart, he still believed love could cross any distance. He didn't see her growing distance, her shame, her silence that spoke more than words. Kunal's world was small but full of heart. He didn't have fame or wealth, but he had dreams bigger than the sky. And though his wife's love was fading, he kept believing that if he sang long enough, if he worked hard enough, someday the world would hear him. He didn't know that soon, the same love that once inspired him would break his heart, and that heartbreak would be the fire that finally made the world listen. The day started with excitement for Kunal. One of Tarila's old friends was getting married, and she insisted they attend. Kunal wore his best shirt, freshly ironed, though slightly faded, and polished his shoes until they shone. But when he stepped out, Tarila frowned. She looked stunning in her gold dress and matching heels, but her eyes held disappointment. "Kunal, can't you dress better? People will be there," she said sharply. He smiled gently. "This is my best, Tarila. You know I don't have much." She sighed, grabbing her purse, and muttered, "Just don't embarrass me today." When they arrived at the hall, music filled the air, and laughter echoed all around. The guests were dressed in bright lace and expensive suits. As Kunal reached for her hand, she pulled away quickly, pretending to fix her dress. She walked ahead, greeting friends with a confident smile, leaving him behind like a stranger. When they entered the seating area, Kunal tried to sit beside her, but she whispered harshly, "Please not. Here. Sit somewhere else. People are watching." Her words hit him like a slap. He froze, forcing a small smile, and quietly moved to a corner seat near the wall. The couple at the next table glanced at him, then at Tarila, whispering. Others soon followed, eyes darting, murmurs spreading. Isn't that her husband? Why is she sitting away from him? Kunal heard it all but kept his head down, staring at his empty plate. He tried to focus on the music, pretending to hum along, but his chest ached. Across the hall he could see Tarila laughing with her friends, sipping juice, posing for pictures, never once looking his way. It felt as though the woman he married no longer saw him as part of her world. When the bride and groom danced, Kunal smiled faintly, remembering how he once sang a love song for Tarila on their wedding night. He sat through the event quietly, clapping when needed, smiling when spoken to, hiding the storm inside. But that moment, her rejection, her fear of being seen with him, burned deep in his heart. On the way home, he didn't say a word. The silence between them was louder than the music that once brought them together. It was the day Kunal realized love alone might not be enough. After that humiliating day, things between Kunal and Tarila began to change quietly but deeply. Tarila no longer wanted to go out with him. Whenever an invitation came, she found excuses. I'm not feeling well. Or it's just for close friends. But Kunnel knew the truth. She didn't want people to see them together anymore. At home, her words became sharper. She complained about everything. The rent, the meals, the little gifts he brought home. Kunnel, when will you stop dreaming and do something real with your life? She snapped one night. You're a man without ambition. Her words cut deeper than any wound. He still tried to please her. He cleaned, cooked, played soft songs to make her smile, but nothing worked. Instead, she mocked his music. Who listens to your roadside songs? She laughed one evening, scrolling on her phone. People sing for fame, not for empty pockets. Kunnel said nothing. He just picked up his guitar and played quietly, letting his pain turn into melody. The strings became his only way to speak, his only friend who listened. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between them grew heavier. She stopped sitting near him during dinner, barely looked up when he talked. Even small things became arguments. He began to feel invisible in his own home, a stranger living under the same roof as his wife. Some nights, he walked to the nearby park and played for strangers who smiled and clapped. Their few coins meant more to him than any of Tarila's words. His friends noticed his sadness. One of them, Ade, said, Kunnel, stop begging for her approval. You have something special. Keep singing. One day, the world will know your name. Kunnel smiled weakly. He wanted to believe it, but hope felt far away. Still, he couldn't give up. Every night, when Tarila slept, he wrote new songs about pain, love, and dreams that refused to die. Deep inside, he believed music would one day open doors that money couldn't. He didn't know when or how, but he promised himself that when the world finally listened, they would hear every tear, every word, and every silence he had endured. The night it all ended began like any other, quiet, tense, and heavy. Kunnel came home late after playing at a small bar, tired but hopeful. He had earned a little money and bought Tarila her favorite suya. She barely looked up from her phone. That's what you call progress, she said coldly. You spend nights on the street and come home smelling of sweat. He tried to smile. I'm trying, Tarila. Things will change soon. But she scoffed. Change? You've been saying that for years. You'll never make it big. I regret marrying you. Her words hung in the air like a knife. Kunnel froze, staring at her. The woman he once sang love songs for now looked at him like a mistake. For the first time, he had no words. He simply turned away, walked into their small room, and sat on the edge of the bed, his heart pounding. His eyes landed on his old guitar leaning against the wall, scratched, worn, but still his most loyal companion. Slowly he packed it into its torn case. Tarila watched him but said nothing. She thought he was bluffing, that he would return after cooling off. But Kunnel didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her one last time and said quietly, I may not have much now, but I'll make music that the world will hear. Then he stepped out into the night. The streets were empty, the air cold, but Kunnel felt strangely free. For the first time, the pain turned into determination. He walked for hours, thinking about every insult, every humiliation, every time he was made to feel small. He knew he couldn't stay where he wasn't respected. By dawn he had made his choice. He would go to Lagos, the city of dreams, noise, and endless hustle. It wouldn't be easy, but he didn't care anymore. He had nothing left to lose. Standing at the roadside with his guitar and a small bag, Kunnel whispered to himself, if the world won't come to hear me, I'll go make them listen. Then he boarded a bus, leaving behind the pain, the shame, and the woman who stopped believing in him. Lagos greeted Kunnel with chaos and hope mixed together. The noise of the city was constant. Buses honking, people shouting, music everywhere. He had nowhere to stay, so an old friend, Chuka, offered him a small corner in his electronics shop. At night, when the shutters closed, Kunnel slept on the floor with his guitar beside him, staring at the ceiling, dreaming of a day when the world would know his name. Each morning, he carried his guitar to busy junctions, singing his heart out as cars passed. Some people stopped, smiled, dropped a few naira, and moved on. Others ignored him completely. Still, Kunnel never stopped singing. He learned the rhythms of the city, when to perform, where the crowds were kindest. His voice carried stories of love, struggle, and pain that people could feel. Some days he earned enough for bread and water, other days, nothing at all. But his fire never went out. A kind vendor nearby once told him, "Your songs touch the soul, my brother. Don't stop." Those words kept him going. One evening, Chuka lent him his old phone. "Record yourself," he said. "Maybe someone will notice." Kunal smiled, not knowing that moment would change everything. He recorded short clips, just his raw voice and guitar, and uploaded them online. The sound wasn't perfect, but the emotion was real. Slowly, strangers began to comment and share. "Who is this man?" they asked. "His songs feel real." For the first time, people who didn't know him cared about his music. Weeks later, as he performed under a bridge in Yaba, a young man approached him. "Are you Kunal? I heard your song on the radio." Kunal's eyes widened. He didn't even know his music had reached that far. That night, he rushed back to Chuka's shop, turned on the small radio, and there it was, his song playing softly, with the host saying, "That was If Love Hurts," by a new voice named Kunal. Kunal sat quietly, tears filling his eyes. The world was finally beginning to listen. From the dusty streets to the airwaves of Lagos, his voice was spreading. One song, one heart at a time. Kunal's life began to shift quietly but powerfully. One afternoon, while sitting outside the shop strumming his guitar, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. The voice on the other end introduced himself as Sei, a talent scout for a small music label in Lagos. "I've seen your videos online," Sei said. "There's something raw and different about you. Would you like to perform at one of our showcases?" Kunal's heart raced. For a moment he couldn't speak. He had been waiting for this kind of chance all his life. The event was held in a small rooftop lounge filled with young artists and producers. Kunal arrived wearing his simple shirt and guitar slung over his shoulder. When it was his turn, he stepped onto the stage, closed his eyes, and sang a song about pain, hope, and love lost. The crowd went silent. His voice carried emotion that couldn't be faked. Among the audience was a well-known producer, Mr. Jide, who watched every second without blinking. When Kunal finished, the room erupted in applause. After the show, Jide walked up to him and said, "You may not look like a star yet, but you sing like one." A few days later, Jide invited him to the studio. "I can't pay you much now," he admitted, "but I'll help you record properly. The world needs to hear you." Kunal didn't hesitate. He wasn't chasing money. He wanted a voice. Together, they recorded a song he wrote during his loneliest nights, "Invisible Man." It was about being unseen, about loving and losing, about being told you're not enough but still rising. When he sang it, every note carried his story. When the song was released online, it spread like wildfire. People across Nigeria shared it, saying, "This song feels like my life." Radio stations picked it up. Bloggers called him the voice of the forgotten. Overnight, Kunal became a symbol of hope for dreamers who had been laughed at. He read comments from strangers saying his song gave them strength, and tears filled his eyes. The same man who once sang on dusty streets was now being played in cars, homes, and cafes everywhere. Kunal finally realized he was no longer invisible. Kunal woke up one morning to hundreds of missed calls and messages. His song "Invisible Man" had exploded overnight. Everyone was talking about it, from Lagos to Abuja, from radio to social media. Videos of people singing along to his lyrics filled the internet. News outlets started calling him the man who turned pain into power. For the first time, Kunal wasn't just a street musician, he was a star. Soon, TV stations invited him for interviews. Sitting in front of bright cameras, he still spoke with the same humility. When asked how success felt, he smiled softly and said, "I'm just grateful people finally hear me." Fans flooded his social media with love and encouragement. They shared how his song gave them courage to keep going despite rejection. Every message reminded Kunal that his pain had found a purpose. Within months, he was performing on big stages he once only dreamed of. The first time he walked onto a concert stage, lights flashing and the crowd chanting his name, he felt his heart swell. Thousands of people were there, singing his words back to him. In his hands was the same old guitar his wife once mocked, scratched simple, but now a symbol of his journey. As he strummed it, tears filled his eyes. He whispered to himself, "We made it." People loved him not just for his music but for his story. His humble style, calm voice, and honesty made him different from other artists. They called him the people's artist, a man who sang what they felt but couldn't say. He refused to change his look or forget his roots, saying, I'm still that street boy from Abadan who just never stopped believing. When his first album was released, he titled it Dreamers Like Me. On the cover was a photo of him sitting on the roadside with his guitar. Inside, the dedication read, "To everyone who was ever told they're not enough, keep believing." The album became an anthem for hope, played everywhere from markets to offices. Kunal's voice had finally reached the world, and his story became proof that no one stays invisible forever. Months passed, and Kunal's life had completely transformed. Invitations to high-end events and charity galas became normal for him, but he still carried himself with the same calm humility. One evening, his manager told him about a charity gala supporting young musicians. "They want you to perform, Kunal," he said. "It's a big event, many elites will be there." Kunal agreed without hesitation. He wanted to inspire others who were still chasing their dreams. The night of the event, the hall glittered with chandeliers and expensive suits. Reporters lined the red carpet, waiting for celebrity arrivals. Inside, laughter and soft music filled the air. Among the guests sat Tarila. Her life had changed too, but not for the better. She was now divorced, living quietly after her family's business took a downturn. Her old friends still invited her to events, but mostly to gossip. That night, they whispered about her past. "Wasn't she married to that struggling singer once?" One of them said, smirking. "I wonder what happened to him." Before Tarila could respond, the host's voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nigeria's own sensation, Kunal." The room erupted. Cameras flashed, people stood, cheering his name. The man she once told to sit away from her was now the center of every spotlight. Dressed in a sleek black suit, holding his familiar guitar, Kunal walked in with quiet confidence. Every eye followed him as he smiled and waved to fans. Tarila froze. Her glass slipped slightly in her hand. She couldn't believe it. The same man she once called a nobody was now the face everyone adored. Her friends gasped when they realized who he was. "That's your ex-husband?" one whispered. She didn't answer. Her throat tightened as she watched him move gracefully through the crowd, shaking hands with dignitaries and celebrities. When Kunal stepped onto the stage, the cheers grew louder. Flashlights sparkled like stars across the hall. Tarila sat still, her eyes fixed on him. In that moment, she saw everything she had thrown away: kindness, patience, love, and the quiet strength she once mocked. The man she left behind was now the man the world celebrated. As the gala continued, Kunal finished his performance to thunderous applause. The organizers approached him smiling and said, "Kunal, we'd like you to join the front row, right beside our special guest." His eyes widened slightly, and when he looked, he realized it was Tarila. She had been sitting quietly among her friends, but now he was being invited to sit directly beside her. As he walked toward the front, the crowd erupted again. Phones were raised, flashes lit the room, and fans called out his name. "Kunal! Kunal!" they shouted, eager for pictures, selfies, and autographs. Kunal paused only briefly, letting the excitement wash over him, then smiled warmly, signing autographs one by one. He interacted with the fans with kindness and humility, his calm presence making everyone feel connected to him. The same man who had once sat alone at parties, ignored and dismissed, was now the star the whole room admired. Tarila watched in disbelief. She leaned slightly toward him and whispered, almost nervously, "Kunal, I didn't know you'd become this big." Her voice was soft, uncertain, filled with a mix of awe and regret. Kunal turned to her, his eyes gentle, his expression calm. He smiled and said quietly, "You didn't need to. I always knew I would." The moment was electric. Cameras captured it from every angle. The once ignored husband now sitting confidently beside the woman who doubted him. The crowd didn't notice the tension. They only saw the glow of success radiating from Kunal. People whispered to each other, impressed by his humility and the way he carried himself. He didn't gloat, didn't mock. He simply existed in his triumph, letting the world and Tarila witness his journey. Fans continued to ask for pictures, some laughing, others cheering him on. Kunal signed autographs with patience, his fingers running over the worn strings of the guitar he always carried, the same instrument that had once been mocked. In that moment, it wasn't just fame, it was justice in the quietest, sweetest form. He had risen through talent, perseverance, and heart, and now everyone, including Tarila, could see that nothing could stop someone who truly believed in themselves. For Kunnel, this was more than revenge. It was proof that success doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be lived. The room celebrated him, the man who refused to be invisible, and everyone saw it. When the event ended and the crowd began to fade, Kunnel quietly stepped outside, away from the flashing lights and endless cheers. The night air was cool, carrying the distant sound of city traffic. He looked up at the sky, the same sky he used to stare at from the streets of Abaddon, wondering if his dreams would ever come true. The stars seemed brighter now, or maybe he was just seeing them differently, through the eyes of a man who had survived heartbreak and found his voice again. He stood there, taking a deep breath, memories flooding his mind. He remembered the night he walked out of his house with nothing but a guitar and a heart full of pain. He remembered sleeping in Chuka's shop, the empty days, the laughter of strangers, and the quiet moments when he almost gave up. He remembered Tarila's words, "You'll never make it big," and how those words had once crushed him. But now, hearing fans still calling his name from inside, he realized he didn't need revenge. He had already won in the most beautiful way possible. Success had become his silence, his peace, his answer. Soon, the host called him back in for one last performance. As he stepped on stage, the crowd rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. He picked up his old guitar, the same one that had carried his story from street corners to grand halls. He smiled and said softly into the mic, "This song is for everyone who was ever told they're not enough." The hall went silent. Then he began to play Invisible Man. His voice carried emotion so deep that people wiped tears from their eyes. As he sang, the audience joined in, their voices blending with his. Thousands of people singing the words of the man who once sang alone on the streets. The sound filled the room and spilled into the night. When the song ended, Kunnel looked out at the crowd, his heart full. He realized his music wasn't just his story anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been doubted. Under the bright lights of Lagos, Kunnel stood tall, proud, free, and unforgettable.